Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission. Simple. We take the stack of sources you've put together on a topic.
And we pull out the most interesting bits, the important stuff, the surprises.
Exactly. It's your shortcut to getting up to speed.
And today, we're plunging into a really specific figure from German history, Hanover, specifically Jasper Hanebuth.
Right. And we're using the documents you shared, text excerpts, info board details, even some old postcards.
Yeah, trying to piece together his life, his crimes, and then maybe dig into this surprisingly persistent legacy he seems to have in Hanover today.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? We've got the basic facts, life dates, where he came from.
His path from, well, mercenary to full-blown criminal.
Pretty violent end.
Yes.
And then all these modern echoes, these ways he pops up in Hanover now. Sometimes it feels like legend more than history.
Well, it's definitely rooted in that brutal time right after the 30 Years' War. But somehow the story just keeps going, centuries later.
Okay, let's unpack this then.
Yeah.
The sources kick off way back. 1607. Where does Jasper Hanebuth's story begin exactly?
Okay, so he was born in a place called Grossbuchholz at Hofpiper, specifically.
Hofpiper.
Yep, the documents confirm the year 1607 and describe it as this half-timbered complex. His father was Hans Hanebuth, a cotter.
A cotter. So, like, worked the land but probably didn't own much?
That's the idea, yeah. And the source gives a baptism date to February 8th, 1607.
And this birthplace, Hofpiper, it's still around.
It is, remarkably. The source mentions it's now a listed building, Buchholz Kirchweg 72. So his actual starting point is still there, a physical place you can see.
Huh. That's interesting. But he didn't stick around farming, did he? What happened next?
No, his path took a pretty sharp turn. He became a mercenary.
The mercenary.
Yeah, served in the Swedish army. This was during the 30 Years' War, all that chaos.
Right.
And interestingly, during this time, the sources say he actually got Hanover citizenship.
Citizenship. While a mercenary. That seems unexpected, especially given where his life ended up.
It does. And apparently he lost it fairly quickly, too. Failed to pay his taxes, according to the source.
Huh. Taxes. Always the taxes, right? Shows up everywhere in history.
Isn't it just?
The source also paints a picture of his personality. Says he had a coarse, violent character, and his tantrums were feared.
Yeah, and that description is, I think, really key. Because the sources explicitly link that character to the time he lived in.
The post-30 Years' War era.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The everyday violence and brutality of morals, as one source puts it, it was a rough, lawless period. Hanebuth seems like maybe an extreme example, but definitely a product of that environment.
And the violence wasn't just, directed outwards. There's a chilling detail in the sources about his robber bride.
Yes, it mentions his victims included her. A really stark detail about his brutality, even close to home.
Grim. So after the mercenary stuff and losing his citizenship,
Yeah.
what then? Did he try to go straight?
Well, he tried something else. The source says he became a horse dealer for a while.
A horse dealer. Okay. Did that work out?
Doesn't seem like it lasted long. He was eventually reported for horse theft.
Ah, right.
And that led to his arrest. November 14th, 1652.
So the criminal path is pretty much set by then. And this arrest, this is where we get the details about the scale of his crimes.
Yeah.
From what happened next.
Precisely. The documents describe him being brought before the council in the Altes Rathaus.
The old town hall.
Right. And facing repeated threats of torture. Meticulous according to the high justice is the phrase used.
High justice, meaning severe interrogation.
Mm-hmm. And under that pressure, he confessed to 10 thefts and 19 murders.
19 murders. Even confessed under duress. That number is just shocking. It really underlines the level of violence.
It's immense. So after these confessions, what happened? Was the sentence immediate?
He was in prison for nearly a year, it seems. Then the sources pinpoint the sentencing. February 3rd or 4th, 1653.
And the sentence itself?
Horrific. The breaking wheel. To
yeah.
be judged by the breaking wheel by his limbs from life to death.
Ugh, the breaking wheel. An incredibly brutal, slow execution designed for maximum suffering.
And the sources confirm the date it happened.
Yes, February 4th, 1653. Jasper Hanebuth was executed by breaking wheel in Hanover, just outside a stone gate.
Okay. So if we just look at the documents, the timeline seems pretty clear. Born 1607.
Mercenary, criminal, horse dealer.
Arrested November 52, confesses to 19 murders under threat of torture.
Executed February 4th, 53, by breaking wheel.
Seems like a very definite, very violent end to his story. Case closed, you'd think.
You would think, but what's truly fascinating and where these sources really open up something else is how his story doesn't quite end there. Not in Hanover's memory, anyway.
Right. This is a really interesting part. Despite this absolutely brutal history, he somehow lingers in the city itself.
He really does. It's not just history books, it's physical stuff, cultural stuff.
Like, where do we see this?
Well, for starters, there's a direct family link you can still see. A tombstone.
A tombstone for Hanebuth.
No, for his younger brother, Henrik. But it's significant. It was sculpted by Peter Coster, a known artist, and it's preserved at St. Nikolai Church.
Okay, so a tangible family connection. That makes some sense. But his name is attached to places too, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. There's a spot called Hanebuth's Gang on the High Bank.
Hanebuth Gang, what is it?
Described as possibly, the remains of an old passage under the city wall. Whether he actually used it or not, who knows? But the name stuck.
The association is there,
Yeah.
historically accurate or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's even a square, the White Cross Square, Weisse-Kreisplatz.
Ah, I saw that mentioned. But the source was careful to say the cross itself was older than Hanebuth, right?
Right, it predates him. But it later got associated with his execution spot. And when the square was officially named in 1929, they used that association. The name stuck.
Wow. So a potentially inaccurate link shapes the city's geography centuries later.
It shows how memory works, doesn't it? And it doesn't stop there. It gets more modern.
There's actually a street named after him.
Yep, Hanebuthwinkel.
Yeah.
In Grossbuchholz, where he was born, named in 1967.
Naming a street after a confessed murderer from centuries ago. Okay.
And wait, there's more at the birthplace. Remember Hofpiper?
The listed building where he was born.
Yeah.
Since 1991, there's an information board right there telling people about this infamous criminal who started life on that spot.
So a public marker detailing his crimes right at his origin point.
Exactly. But then it gets even more layered because right there in front of the same building, there's a sculpture.
Oh, you mean that Waldemar Otto piece. Large pedestal torso XX from 1986.
That's the one. And critically, the sources say there's an extra sign added to its base.
What does the sign say?
It reads, Jasper Hanebuth's last victim.
Wow. Placed right at his birthplace. That's incredibly pointed. A modern artistic commentary linking his violence directly back to where he came from.
It's powerful, isn't it? And there are older cultural traces, too.
Like peace cards?
Yeah, picture postcards from around 1898 showing something called Hanebuth's Block near the old zoo entrance. Again, the name association.
And he even turns up in fiction.
More recently, yeah. A 2010 historical novel apparently features him as a dark novel hero. A dark novel hero. That's quite a phrase. Especially when you put it next to the documented brutality, the 19 murders, the last victim sculpture.
It really highlights the contradictions, doesn't it? The different ways his story gets told and remembered.
And there were legends, too. Something about him helping the poor.
The sources mention that, yes, suggesting this kind of Robin Hood of Hanover idea might have cropped up over the years.
Like a local folk anti-hero?
Possibly. Though the sources are quick to point out that many of these legends, well, they just can't be confirmed by historical evidence.
Right, so it's this mix. On one hand, you have the stark, brutal facts from the documents.
A violent man, product of a violent time, confessed to horrific crimes executed horrifically.
And on the other hand, you have this undeniable, long-lasting footprint in the city. Street names, public art, maybe even these shifting legends.
It really makes you ask that central question, doesn't it? How does someone known for such extreme violence and crime end up woven into the fabric of a place like this?
Yeah, how does that happen? From official markers that name him as a criminal, to art focusing on his victims, to street names, and even these romanticized folktales.
The sources you provided, they give us the documented Hanebuth. Violent, executed. But tracing his legacy shows how that story morphs over time. It gets tangled up with places, with memory, with maybe what people want to believe, or just how stories evolve.
It's a really vivid example, isn't it, of how communities process or maybe grapple with these difficult figures from their past.
Definitely. History isn't just facts in a book. It's remembered, it's marked on the landscape, it's retold, reshaped. Fact and legend get blurred.
So here's something to maybe chew on after this. We have these stark details from the sources, the brutality of his confessed crimes, the horror of the breaking wheel. Given all that, what does Jasper Hanebuth's continued, very varied presence in Hanover tell us about the stories we choose to keep alive, and maybe how place and myth can soften or at least complicate even the harshest historical truths?